In the world's forgotten clinics, the most precious currency isn't money, it's blood. And tonight, the last unit of O negative is gone. A man is bleeding out. His heart is failing. The doctor has minutes. Then a quiet voice speaks from the corner. A 14-year-old boy with a rare blood type no one knew he had. He says, "Take mine." He doesn't know the dying man. He doesn't know the man's wife is a billionaire watching her world end. This is the story of the 1 pint of blood that changed everything. This happens every single day. A global shortage of 102 million units of blood turns ordinary clinics into crisis zones, but this case was different. The blood type required was so rare, it's found in less than 1% of the population. And the woman in the doorway wasn't just any wife. She was Adiza Sorai, founder of a billion-dollar tech empire. She made one promise: find the boy who saved her husband. But in a continent where millions live in blood deserts, how do you find one child who vanished back into the streets? To understand why this moment was impossible, you need to meet the boy. His name is Kofi, 14 years old. He exists in the margins of a city that moves too fast to see him. Each morning before the sun heats the pavement, he walks 3 miles from the makeshift shelter he shares with 5 other boys to the market district. His job is simple: carry goods for shoppers. A bag of rice, a bundle of fabric, a crate of soda. Payment is whatever someone decides to give him. Sometimes it's coins, sometimes it's a piece of fruit, sometimes it's nothing at all. He learned the rules of invisibility early. Keep your eyes down, don't speak unless spoken to, move quickly but don't run. Hunger is a constant companion, a hollow feeling he has carried since his mother died of a fever 4 years ago. The clinic she was taken to had no blood for a transfusion. They wrote her cause of death as anemia, a simple, preventable word. After that, the family scattered. An uncle took him in for a while, but another mouth to feed became another argument. So Kofi left, not with anger but with understanding. The streets were kinder than pity. His world is measured in footsteps and survival. He knows which market stalls might give him leftover food at closing. He knows which water pumps are clean. He knows the sound of police trucks before anyone else, the signal to melt into the alleyways. Dignity for Kofi is a private thing. It's in the way he folds his single spare shirt. It's in the quiet "thank you" he offers even when no payment comes. It's in the memory of his mother's voice telling him to be good, even when the world is not. Meanwhile, in a different universe of glass and steel, Adiza Sorai was fighting her own battle. Her company, Sorai Networks, was on the verge of signing the largest telecommunications deal in West African history. A contract worth $300 million. It would bring high-speed internet to thousands of rural villages. The very places where clinics like the one her husband would soon enter were failing. Her husband, Kwame, handled the logistics. His trucks would carry the tower equipment. He was the quiet engine of her ambition. But success draws shadows. 2 days before the contract signing, Kwame complained of stomach pains. He thought it was stress, a bad meal. By evening, he was vomiting blood. Their personal doctor suspected poisoning. A rival firm, desperate to stall the deal, was the immediate suspicion. Adiza commanded her security team to move him discreetly, not to the big city hospital where press lurked, but to a small, private clinic in a town near the project site. It was meant to be a safe house, a place to stabilize him away from the chaos. They never made it. Kwame's condition crashed in the car. The driver, panicked, diverted to the nearest medical facility he saw, the St. Michael Rural Health Center, a single-story concrete building with a flickering sign. It was not a clinic chosen by strategy. It was a clinic chosen by desperation. Inside St. Michael's, the reality was even starker. Dr. Ngozi Okoro had just finished her 17-hour shift. She was washing her hands when the commotion erupted. A man was carried in, unconscious, his blood pressure plummeting, internal bleeding. She ordered fluids, but the real need was blood. And here lies the brutal arithmetic of medicine in a blood desert. The clinic's refrigerator, a single agging unit, held 4 bags of blood. 2 were expired. 1 was the wrong type. The last was O negative, the universal donor, reserved for absolute emergencies. They used it immediately. It wasn't enough. Dr. Okoro called the regional blood bank. The answer was a record of every crisis in the system. All O-negative units were allocated. The next delivery drone was 24 hours away. A mother in a village 50 miles away was hemorrhaging after childbirth. She had priority. In this moment, Kwame Sorai was not a billionaire's husband. He was another man about to become a statistic in the 102 million unit annual shortfall. Dr. Okoro made the call to the family in the waiting room. Adiza stood, her designer suit stark against the cracked plastic chairs. We need a direct blood donor, right now. He needs O negative, or he needs someone with a compatible rare type. We must type everyone here. Adiza, her two assistants, and the driver rolled up their sleeves. The nurse pricked their fingers. The results were a cruel joke of genetics. No match. Adiza's blood type was a positive, common, useless. She stared at her husband through the glass, his skin the color of ash. This was the woman who negotiated with prime ministers, who commanded a fleet of engineers, who could summon resources with a phone call. And she was powerless, because money cannot manufacture blood. Not here, not in time. Now let's return to Kofi. His day had been long. He had earned barely enough for a bowl of rice. A dull ache pulsed behind his eyes, a familiar sign of dehydration. He remembered the clinic near the market had a clean water tap outside. Sometimes the nurses would let him fill his bottle. It was worth the walk. He arrived as the sky turned violet. He saw the expensive car first. Then he saw the woman in the doorway, her face a mask of shattered composure. He didn't stare. He knew better than to look at people like her. He moved to the side tap, filled his plastic bottle, and drank deeply. The door to the clinic was open. He heard the doctor's voice, tight with stress. If we don't find a donor in the next 15 minutes, we will lose him. Kofi finished his water. The words echoed, "We will lose him." He saw his mother's face. He saw the clinic where she died, where a doctor said similar words. He looked at his own thin arms. He had nothing to give, but he had himself. He stepped into the doorway. All eyes turned to him. The wealthy woman, the exhausted doctor, the nervous nurse. He spoke so quietly they almost didn't hear him. "You can test me." Dr. Okoro blinked. "Young man, do you understand? We need a specific blood type." Kofi nodded. "I don't know my type, but you can test me." It was a futile hope, but hope was all that remained. The nurse gestured him in. She cleaned his finger with alcohol, a sting he didn't flinch from. She pricked it, squeezed a drop onto a typing card. The chemical reactions began. The first, well, negative. The second, negative. She moved to the third, a test for rare antigens. A slow, unmistakable color change. She looked up, her eyes wide. She showed the card to Dr. Okoro. The doctor's breath caught. Duffy negative. A blood type so rare it occurs in less than 1% of the global population. But in West Africa, where the genetic trait evolved as a defense against malaria, it is more common, and it was a perfect match for Kwame Sorai. Kofi had never been tested for anything in his life. He didn't know he carried a biological heirloom in his veins that could stop a billionaire from bleeding out. They asked him to sit. They explained the procedure. He listened, still not fully understanding who the man was. They asked if he was sure. He looked at the doctor and simply said, "My mother needed blood once. No one came." That was his entire reason. The needle went into his arm. His blood, dark and vital, began to flow through a tube into a bag. Across the room, Adiza Sorai watched, one hand pressed to her mouth. She saw the boy's courage. She saw his worn clothes. She saw the profound, unequal exchange happening in front of her. A life she could not save with all her wealth, being saved by a boy who had nothing. The transfusion took 30 minutes. Color slowly returned to Kwame's face. His vital signs stabilized. The immediate crisis passed. Kofi sat through it all, feeling a little lightheaded, watching his own blood leave his body. When it was done, the nurse gave him a sweet drink and a packet of biscuits. She bandaged his arm. Dr. Okoro thanked him, her voice thick with emotion. Adiza approached him. She knelt down, bringing herself to his eye level. "What is your name?" "Kofi." "Kofi," she said, her voice trembling, "you have saved my husband's life. You have saved my life. I will find you. I will repay you. Whatever you need, it is yours. Do you understand?" Kofi nodded, not because he believed her, but because it was the polite thing to do. People made promises. Then they drove away in their big cars. He finished his biscuit, thanked the nurse again, and walked back out into the gathering night. He vanished into the maze of streets, a slight boy with a small bandage on his arm, completely unaware that the most powerful woman he would ever meet had just sworn a vow that would tear his world apart. Because Adiza Sorai meant what she said. But first she had to find him. And in a city of 8 million people, Where a street child has no address, no phone, and no last name, finding one boy is like finding a single drop of water in the ocean. She would soon learn that gratitude, when you have infinite resources, can become an obsession, and her hunt was about to begin. Adiza Sorai's first move was logical. She used the tools of her world, money and technology. The morning after the transfusion, with Quame stabilized in a high-care city hospital, she called her head of security. His name was Samuel, a former intelligence officer. She gave him the only facts she had: a boy, about 14, named Kofi, Duffy negative blood type, last seen at the St. Michael Rural Health Center. Find him. Samuel deployed a team. They started at the clinic. Dr. Okoro could only repeat what she knew. The boy came for water. He was quiet. He was kind. He left after the transfusion. No address, no family name. Samuel's men scanned the market nearby. They showed a digitally enhanced sketch on tablets to vendors. Most shook their heads. A few remembered a thin boy who carried goods. But a name, a place, nothing. The streets absorbed children like water absorbs rain. For 3 days, Samuel's team hit walls. They checked shelters. They even accessed vague city census data of homeless youth. Thousands of entries, no useful identifiers. Adiza grew impatient. Her gratitude was curdling into frustration. How could someone simply vanish? She upped the reward, $50,000 to anyone with information leading to Kofi. The announcement went out through local radio and street posters. It created a small earthquake in the district. Suddenly, everyone had seen Kofi. Dozens of leads flooded a special phone line. He was seen heading north. He was working at a quarry. He was begging at the mosque. Samuel's team chased everyone. They were all dead ends, either mistaken identity or outright lies from people desperate for the money. The reward had made Kofi a ghost because now anyone who truly knew him was afraid to speak. To bring a wealthy woman's attention to a street child was to invite trouble, not fortune. Adiza sat in her penthouse office, the sprawling city lights below her. She replayed the moment in the clinic. The boy's calm eyes, his simple statement about his mother. For the first time, she considered a terrifying thought. What if her way of finding him, the money, the posters, the men in suits, was the very reason she could? What if she was hunting him instead of looking for him? She made a decision that defied every boardroom instinct. She would go back, alone, no security, no designer suit. She changed into plain clothes, covered her distinctive hair with a simple head wrap, and drove herself back to the clinic. Dr. Okoro was surprised to see her. Adiza didn't ask for leads this time. She asked for understanding. "Tell me about this place," she said. "Tell me about the boys who come here." So Dr. Okoro told her. She spoke of the silent epidemic of children who used the clinic's outside tap as their primary water source. She explained how they got sick from preventable things: scabies, worms, infected cuts. How they feared authority because authority often meant roundups or beatings. How their trust was not bought but earned through consistency and quiet kindness. The doctor pointed to a faded bench outside. "They sit there sometimes, especially in the evening heat. They feel safe here because we don't chase them away." Adiza sat on that bench for 2 hours. She watched life flow past. She saw the weary pace of the working poor, and then she saw them, 2 boys younger than Kofi, approaching the tap. They filled their bottles, glancing warily at her. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She just sat, non-threatening. One of them finally spoke. "You waiting for the doctor?" Adiza shook her head. "No, I am just sitting." They accepted that. They sat on the curb a few feet away. This was the fragile bridge. After a long silence, Adiza spoke, keeping her eyes on the traffic. "I am looking for a boy named Kofi. He helped someone here. I want to thank him. I want to make sure he is okay." The boys exchanged a look. The taller one shrugged. "Many Kofis. This one is 14. He has a scar here," Adiza said, drawing a line on her own left eyebrow, a detail she had finally remembered from the transfusion room. The boys went very still. The silent communication of the streets passed between them. Finally, the smaller one said, "Why you want him? The money." "No money," Adiza said, and it was the truth in that moment. "I made a promise to him. I keep my promises." They studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then the tall boy said, "He sleeps near the old bus garage, sometimes, when the night watchman is not there." And with that, they stood and melted into an alley, leaving Adiza with the first real coordinate in her search. The old bus garage was a cavernous, rusted shell on the industrial edge of the district. That night, Adiza went with Samuel, but instructed him to stay in the car, out of sight. She walked alone into the dark space, a flashlight in her hand. The air smelled of diesel, urine, and decay. She called out softly, "Kofi, my name is Adiza," from the clinic. Silence, then a scuffle. A shape moved behind a pile of discarded tires. She aimed her light, not directly at the figure, but at the ground nearby. It was him. He was crouched, eyes wide with alarm, ready to flee. In that instant, she saw not the brave donor, but a terrified child. "I am not here to hurt you," she said, her voice low. "I told you I would find you. I keep my word." Kofi slowly stood. He was shivering, though the night was warm. "Why?" he asked, the same simple, profound question. "Because what you did was not small," Adiza said. "You saved a life, my life, and I want to help you. Will you let me help you?" He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He just stood there, trapped between a lifetime of survival instinct and a faint, dangerous flicker of hope. Adiza made her offer, not a reward, an invitation. "Come with me tonight to a safe place, food, a bed, no questions, no obligations, just rest. In the morning, you can decide what you want." It was the lack of pressure that convinced him. The promise of a single night's safety. He nodded once. She brought him to a modest, secure apartment owned by her company, not her home. She had a nurse check him. He was malnourished, anemic from his recent blood donation, and had a parasitic infection. She sat with him while he ate his first full meal in memory. He ate slowly, methodically, as if afraid the food would disappear. He did not speak. She did not push. The next morning, over breakfast, she asked her question again. "What do you need, Kofi?" He looked out the window at the clean, quiet street. He said, "I want to go to school." The simplicity of it shattered her. Not money, not a car, an education, the fundamental key he had been denied. Adiza's mission solidified. This would be her repayment. She enrolled him in a private academy under scholarship program she would fund. She arranged for a tutor to catch him up. She found a kindly, retired couple who agreed to be his foster guardians, with Adiza covering all expenses. She was not adopting him. She was creating a bridge for him to walk across, if he chose. For 2 weeks, a fragile routine began. Kofi went to school. He lived in a clean room. He gained weight. He even smiled at the foster mother's jokes. Adiza visited often, bringing books, listening to his hesitant stories about his lessons. She saw the brilliant, curious mind emerging from beneath the layers of trauma and neglect. She began to think this was working, a life repaired. But she had forgotten the other players in her world. The $300 million contract was still pending. Her rivals, who had potentially poisoned Quame, were watching, and a billionaire philanthropist taking a personal interest in a street child was not a secret that could be kept. A news article appeared in a Business Digest. A small column, "Sorai's secret charity, CEO's personal project raises eyebrows." It framed the story as a sentimental distraction, questioning her focus during a critical deal. It mentioned a street boy and hinted at irresponsible use of company resources. It was designed to wound her credibility. Then the call came, an anonymous number, a digitally altered voice. "Stop playing mother, send the boy back where he belongs, or the next poisoning will finish the job, and we will find the boy too." The threat was clear. Kofi was no longer just a beneficiary of her gratitude. He had become a target. Her repayment had painted a target on his back. Adiza stood in her office, the city gleaming, hostile below. She realized she had made a catastrophic error. She had brought a boy from the invisible streets into the crosshairs of a very visible, very dangerous war. And now, she had to protect him from the very disaster her gratitude had created. The hunt was over. A new one was about to begin. Adiza did what she knew best. She went to war, but this was a war with no clear battlefield. She moved Kofi that same night, not to another apartment, but to a remote, guarded farmhouse owned by a trusted employee's family. She doubled Quame's security at the hospital. She called an emergency board meeting and pushed the $300 million contract signing forward by 48 hours. Her reasoning was brutal. If the deal was done, the motive for attacking her family vanished. Her rivals, a conglomerate called Nkrumah Holdings, would have lost. The board agreed. The signing was set for 2 days later. Adiza thought she had outmaneuvered them. She had secured the assets. She had protected the boy. She had stabilized the situation, but she had made one fatal miscalculation. She assumed the attack was purely business. It was. The next morning, a package arrived at her office. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small, clear vial of dark liquid. The paper read, "A sample of the future. Your boy's blood is worth more than your signature. We will have both." Samuel, her security chief, had the vial analyzed. The results turned his face ashen. He called Adiza into a secure room. "It's not poison," he said. "It's a synthesized compound, a biotech product. They've reverse-engineered something from the blood sample taken at the clinic." Adiza was confused. "What are you talking about?" Samuel pulled up a confidential medical report on a tablet. "Kofi's blood isn't just Duffy negative. It has an exceptionally high concentration of a natural antibody, one that binds to a protein found in malaria parasites. It's a potential blueprint for a universal malaria vaccine. The clinic's basic typing card wouldn't show this, but a full analysis would. And someone at that clinic was paid to run that analysis and send the results to Nkrumah Holdings." The world tilted. Adiza remembered the nervous young lab technician at St. Michael who had processed Kofi's blood. He had been sweating. She had thought it was the heat. This wasn't about a telecommunications contract anymore. This was about a medical breakthrough worth billions. Kofi wasn't a target to hurt her. He was a commodity to be harvested. Nkrumah Holdings had a dormant biotechnology division. They had been quietly buying up patents related to malaria treatment. They needed a biological key, and in a moment of crisis, Adiza had delivered it to them, wrapped in the veins of a street child. The poisoning of Quame now seemed like a grim coincidence they had exploited, or perhaps even a test to see what would emerge from the woodwork. The threat was now existential. They didn't just want Kofi to pressure Adiza, they wanted him for his blood, permanently. The anonymous call had been a bluff to scare her into dropping her guard, to make her move him to a predictable location. The farmhouse was already compromised. Samuel's phone rang. It was the head of the farmhouse security team. His voice was tight. "We've had a breach attempt, 2 men, professional. We repelled them, but they were scanning for biometrics. They weren't here to kidnap. They were here to confirm his presence." Adiza's mind raced. They were being hunted with military precision. She had to get Kofi to a place even she couldn't predict. She thought of the one person who existed outside her world, who had shown unconditional integrity, Dr. Ngozi Okoro. She called the clinic. She didn't explain. She simply said, "Doctor, I need your help. The boy is in grave danger. Can you hide him for 24 hours? There was a long pause. Then Dr. Okoro said, "Bring him to the back entrance, after dark." That night, under a moonless sky, Adiza and Samuel drove Kofi back to the very clinic where it all began. It was the last place anyone would look. Dr. Okoro met them at the rear door, her face set in grim determination. She led Kofi to a small, locked storage room that had been converted into a temporary on-call sleeping quarters. It had a cot, a sink, and a door that locked from the inside. "He stays here until you tell me otherwise," Dr. Okoro said. "My nurses are loyal. They see nothing." Kofi, who had been silent through the frantic journey, looked at Adiza. His earlier fear was gone, replaced by a chilling calm. "They want my blood," he stated. It wasn't a question. Adiza knelt. "Yes, and I will not let them take it, or you." He nodded slowly. "My mother died of malaria," he said. "If my blood can stop that, shouldn't they have it?" The question struck Adiza like a physical blow. In his simple morality, the calculus was clear. If his body could prevent suffering, it should be used. He didn't see a commodity. He saw a cure. She saw the monstrous irony. The very altruism that had saved her husband was now being used to justify his exploitation. "It's not that simple, Kofi," she said, her voice cracking. "They don't want to help people. They want to own the cure. They will take everything from you and give nothing back. Do you understand?" He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. He understood power. He had lived under its heel his entire life. With Kofi hidden, Adiza turned her fury on Nkrumah Holdings. She used every legal and financial weapon at her disposal. She filed injunctions, alleging corporate espionage and biopiracy. She leaked the story of the attempted biometric breach to a friendly journalist, framing it as a kidnapping attempt on a minor. Public sentiment began to shift. The narrative of a cold-hearted corporation targeting a child philanthropist was a public relations nightmare. But Nkrumah fought back dirty. They released their own press statement. They claimed Adiza Sore was holding a juvenile with a unique genetic trait against his will, exploiting him for her own biotech ambitions. They presented fabricated documents suggesting Sore Networks was launching a secret vaccine division. They muddied the water perfectly. The world now saw a confusing corporate feud with a mysterious boy at the center. Adiza was trapped. She couldn't reveal Kofi's location to prove he was safe without endangering him. She was losing the narrative war. Then the final blow landed. Kwame, still recovering in the hospital, received a visitor, a man from the Ministry of Health. He presented a fish-looking paperwork. Given the national medical significance of this juvenile's unique biology and the conflicting claims of guardianship, the ministry is invoking a public health emergency clause. The subject, Kofi, is to be placed into protective state custody at a secure medical facility for evaluation and his own safety. It was a legal seizure. Nkrumah had bought influence at the highest levels. They were going to take him with the full force of the law. Samuel intercepted the order before it could be executed. He rushed to Adiza. "We have maybe 6 hours. If they find him at the clinic with a doctor who is hiding him, they arrest her too. We have to move him again, but there is nowhere left." Adiza stood in the center of her office, the walls closing in. Every move had been countered, every sanctuary violated. The tools of her world, money, law, influence, had all been turned against her. She had tried to repay a debt with the currency of power, and it had created a vortex that was about to swallow the very boy she wanted to save. In that moment of utter defeat, she remembered Kofi's question. Why? She had answered because he saved a life. But now she had to ask herself a harder question. Was she trying to save Kofi, or was she trying to win? The distinction became clear. To win, she had to keep fighting in the arena they had built. To save him, she might have to leave it entirely. She made a decision that defied every instinct. She wouldn't hide him, she wouldn't fight the order, she would comply, but not on their terms. She called Dr. Okoro. "Prepare him, we're bringing him in." Then she called Samuel. "We are going to walk Kofi into the Ministry of Health building ourselves. At noon, in front of every camera we can summon." Samuel was horrified. "They'll take him." "Maybe," Adiza said, a dangerous plan forming. "But they won't be able to disappear him. Not if the whole world is watching. Not if I hand him over with a speech that will burn their house down." It was a desperate gambit, turning a private war into a public spectacle. She would use the media, the one weapon she hadn't fully deployed, not to obscure, but to illuminate. She would tell the whole story, from the blood desert to the biotech greed, and paint a target on herself so bright that any move against Kofi would be seen by millions. She was no longer just a CEO protecting an asset. She was a woman about to bet everything on the court of public opinion and the basic, fragile hope that in the light, even the powerful could be held accountable. She was going to take the invisible boy and make him the most seen child on the continent. And in doing so, she would either set him free or doom them both. The clock was ticking. Noon was in 3 hours. At 11:55 a.m., a line of black cars pulled up to the Ministry of Health, but they weren't government vehicles. They were Adiza Sore's. She stepped out of the first car, dressed not in a power suit, but in a simple, elegant dress of deep blue. From the second car emerged Samuel, and from the third, Kofi, holding Dr. Okoro's hand. The doctor had insisted on coming. She wore her white coat like armor. A crowd had gathered. News vans, alerted by Adiza's own public relations team, lined the street. Camera flashes popped like silent fireworks. Ministry officials watched from the steps, confused. This was not a discreet handover. This was a spectacle. Adiza walked forward, Kofi at her side. She stopped at the base of the steps and turned to face the cameras. She did not wait for permission. She spoke into the cluster of microphones, her voice clear and unwavering. "My name is Adiza Sore. This is Kofi. 5 weeks ago, in a rural clinic with no blood, This boy saved my husband's life by giving his own. He asked for nothing. In return, I promised to help him. That help was twisted into a target. The company known as Nkrumah Holdings discovered that Kofi's blood contains rare properties. Instead of seeking to study it ethically, they have attempted to steal it. They have threatened his life. They have corrupted officials to issue this false custody order. She held up the ministry order for the cameras. This paper claims to protect him. It is a license to kidnap. So today, I am not defying the ministry. I am complying publicly. You may take Kofi, but you will take him in front of these cameras. You will take him with Dr. Ngozi Okoro, who saved my husband, as his witness. And you will take him while I announce that I am dedicating $100 million of my personal fortune to end the blood deserts that almost killed my husband and that forced children like Kofi to be walking blood banks in the first place. The silence was absolute. Then a roar of shouted questions. The ministry officials on the steps were paralyzed. The plan had been to quietly absorb the boy into a secure, private facility. This was a floodlight. One senior official stepped forward, his face pale. Ms. Sorai, this is highly irregular. The order is for protective custody, not a media event. Then protect him here, Adiza fired back. Let the world see how the ministry protects children, or withdraw the order. It was a checkmate in plain sight. The official retreated, murmuring into a phone. Inside the building, panic was spreading. The script had been flipped. The Minister of Health himself, watching the live feed, made a calculation. The political cost of seizing a child on international television, branded as a corporate pawn, was too high. The order from Nkrumah had come with promises, but those promises weren't worth his career. 15 minutes later, the same official returned. He announced that, upon review, the emergency custody order was being suspended pending a full inquiry into its origins. Kofi would be released into the temporary guardianship of Dr. Okoro, with Adiza Sorai providing security. The retreat was a rout. But Adiza wasn't finished. She had the momentum. That afternoon, she held a formal press conference. She presented Samuel's evidence, the vial of synthesized compound, the financial links between the bribed lab technician and Nkrumah's biotech shell company, the records of the biometric scan at the farmhouse. She didn't just accuse, she documented. The story exploded. It was no longer a business feud. It was a scandal with a human face. The image of Kofi, small and brave beside Adiza, circled the globe. The narrative of corporate biopiracy against a homeless child was irresistible. By evening, Nkrumah Holdings' stock was plummeting. By the next morning, government regulators had announced investigations into the company's biotech division and its practices. The tower of greed they had built began to crumble from the inside. Whistleblowers emerged. The poisoning of Kwame was re-examined. While never conclusively tied to Nkrumah, the cloud of suspicion was enough. The $300 million contract was signed, not with a triumphant Adiza, but with a someone who announced that a percentage of all profits would fund rural health clinics. In the quiet aftermath, the real work began. Adiza made good on her promise. She established the Kofi Initiative. Its first mission, to deploy solar-powered blood refrigeration units and drone delivery networks to 50 rural clinics across the country within 2 years. Its second, to fund ethical, open-source research into the malaria antibodies found in Kofi's blood, with any breakthroughs to be licensed at cost to the World Health Organization. Kofi did not return to the streets. He did not go to a flashy international school. At his request, he enrolled in a good local academy where he could build a life in his own country. He lived with Dr. Okoro, who became his legal guardian. Adiza visited weekly, not as a benefactor, but as a friend. She helped him trace his extended family, finding a warm but impoverished aunt in a northern village. The Kofi Initiative built a new clinic in that village, and the aunt was given a job there as a community health worker. The circle of care kept widening. Kwame made a full recovery. He and Adiza, their marriage forged in a crucible of crisis, grew closer. He took over the logistics for the Kofi Initiative, using his fleet of trucks to deliver blood and medicine. The boy who saved his life became the compass for their second act. 1 year later, Kofi stood on a stage. It was the opening of the first completed clinic under his namesake initiative, located just a few miles from the old St. Michael's. He was 15, taller, his eyes bright with confidence. He spoke briefly, thanking Dr. Okoro, thanking Adiza. Then he said, "A year ago, I had only my blood to give. Today, this clinic means thousands of people will have more to give than just that. That is the real repayment." The surprise, the final twist, came not from a corporate boardroom, but from a genetics lab. The open-source research funded by the initiative made a discovery. The potent antibody in Kofi's blood was not a random mutation. It was a hereditary trait, traceable through a specific lineage in his ethnic group. The research team, working with elders and historians, found that this lineage was historically known as traditional healers who were resistant to fever. Kofi's gift was an inheritance, a hidden legacy carried by perhaps thousands of people who had no idea. The initiative began a respectful, consent-based screening program, offering health insights and inviting voluntary participation in the research. The cure, it turned out, was not in owning one boy's blood, but in understanding a people's hidden strength. Adiza's hunt for a boy to repay a debt ended not with a single life changed, but with a systemic attack on the very problem that had almost killed her husband. The 1 pint of blood became a river of change. But this story leaves us with a question that transcends any single act of kindness. In a world that tells us we are too small to make a difference, what do you do when you have nothing to give except yourself? The answer may not just save a life, it might just change the world. And that brings us to our final moments together. So what does this story mean for you, right now, wherever you are watching? The crisis that brought Kofi and Adiza together wasn't fiction. The 102 million unit global blood shortage is real. The blood deserts are real. The next time you walk past a blood donation van or ignore a clinic donation drive, remember the fragile arithmetic that decides who lives and who dies in places without that choice. This wasn't just a story about a billionaire's gratitude. It was a story about value. Our world assigns value based on power, wealth, and visibility. Kofi had none of those, and yet his inherent value, his humanity, his courage, his unique biology, became the catalyst that toppled corporate giants and built new systems of care. He was priceless precisely because no one had ever put a price on him until someone tried to steal him. Adiza learned that repayment isn't a transaction, it's a transformation. She didn't write Kofi a check. She used her power to attack the conditions that created his vulnerability in the first place. That is the higher form of gratitude, one that looks beyond the individual act to fix the broken system that made the act necessary. Before we go, I want you to pause, look at the time, remember where you are. Now ask yourself, in this world of overwhelming problems, what is your currency? Is it money? Is it time? Is it your voice? Or is it something simpler, something more profound, your willingness to see someone the world has chosen to ignore? Kofi's story asks us the most uncomfortable question of all. When faced with suffering, do we walk past because we feel too small to matter? Or do we stop because the act of stopping is what makes us matter? If this story connected with you, if it reminded you that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important, then don't let this feeling fade. Share this story, talk about the blood deserts, commit to one act of seeing someone invisible this week. And if you believe in the power of stories like this to change perspectives, then join our community. Hit subscribe because we are just getting started. Together, let's prove that no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Thank you for watching.